Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and these couple systems that you see out here on the bench. I'm planning on feeding them. You can see I've got a few food items over there. I've even got my worm chow over there in that jar. These systems are my newest systems, only 19 days of age on the actual worm bin. And it's got my original red wigglers in there. Originally there was a feeding right when they got put in there. And then another one 10 days later, now another 9 days later. So this is feeding number 3 that the bin's received so far. Something else I did after the worms were relocated and positioned into their new home was that I held on to their old home. Even though their finished castings were pretty much worm-free at that point, I assumed that there would probably still be some cocoons that might be hatching, maybe some stragglers that didn't really come together when I was rounding up the worms and relocating them, so we've got a little bit of a baiting box situation going on in this one that we're going to check in on. So I'm going to get a glove on, let's get to work. When the worms were originally removed from here, I didn't really, do much fanfare or anything about this system. The worms were removed, the finished castings, this bin of finished castings was just moved aside, and I think I was even kind of non-committal about trying to do any sort of a after-the-fact roundup in here. The reason being, we left the system go for a really, really, really long time as sort of like a test of a wedge method of managing one end of the bin as the newly fed side as opposed to the opposite end being the old side where there's pretty much no more food or bedding left, kind of forcing the worms to stick towards, always gravitating towards the freshly replenished end, leaving their finished product on the opposite end. And that was part of the reason I sort of felt like, and it went for quite a long time too, so I almost felt like I was already running a sort of cocoon nursery in there already. So, 19 days ago, I didn't feel like I was just starting from scratch on a cocoon nursery. It did seem to me like this had already been sort of functioning as one for some time. It looks like our tape is not holding together very well. Alright, so, oh geez, where'd they go? I turned my back for a second and the worms split on me. Oh well. My only concern is how these two boxes seem to have come detached from each other. Hopefully not sending a bunch of wormies free. Worms that might have already been captive in a way inside of our little bait box. Although I'd like to think that they didn't come in here as captives. They came in as voluntary visitors and decided they liked it so much they would just stay. And that really is a better way to describe it, I would say, because the finished castings on the outside are fairly depleted of food, bedding, and all the things they generally need. Even moisture's running low. And inside the bait box, we provided all kinds of juicy veggies, things that would be thoroughly dampening the nice fresh bedding that was put in there too. So my hope is that we got a good collection of worms coming together. But you know what? I just reminded myself. The reason we're coming in here was because that's not how I set this bait box up. That's how I set the bait box up in another system that I've got. And here I tried to take sort of a very minimal approach of, I think it was bedding only. And then after the fact, I started thinking to myself, I really should have put some food in there, some good stuff that would actually cause the worms to want to go in there in the first place. Because last time we checked this thing, it seemed like pretty much no worms had collected in here. And I got a feeling just based on how we had just reset this thing, we might not have even, collected many more if it was just bedding in this thing that was attempting to lure them over and convince them to stay. Because yeah, and that other baiting system that I've got going on in another spot, it did seem like putting cucumber in there for them. And I think I even put worm chow in there for them. Really resulted in very good numbers coming together. But the whole idea of baiting here, I guess, is to not have to pick out worms individually one by one. But I just somehow can never resist. So let's see if I could sort of get to a point where I halt. But I guess that's the other thing too, if there is still a lot of worms out in the material at large, then we do want to continue with the baiting. But if by chance they've actually all come together now and they're all hanging out inside the box, then maybe the job is done. But I think it's pretty clear that it's not. We've not yet successfully lured the worms out of this finished castings material with our bait box because they're all just hanging out in their finished castings still. So, all right, you know what? Let's just get this piece of paper we had. Oop, looks like there's another worm hanging out on the plastic. Let's get him back over here too. That's something I worry about, that I sometimes unintentionally strand a worm or two while we're working here. I'm not sure it's enough time for it to be really detrimental to a worm, the short period of time that we spend working in our bins, but either way, I prefer not to leave them out on the in the dry like that. This tape's not working too good. I think we might swap that out with a replacement too here. So I don't know. What do you think? Are we going to get good results here or lackluster? Just for comparison, when I did have what I considered to be very good results in the other bait box and the other system that I'm doing this in, there was no signs of even one shred of cardboard. They ate every morsel of cardboard within the boxes, and here they've hardly touched it, and I hardly see any worms within the material. Just a couple here and there. So I think it's clear that we've just not set the table in a way that's enticing the worms to come over. Certainly no worm relocation occurring today, but you know, I guess it's inevitable. I'm just going to get my hands a little bit soiled here so I can help this process along, get these boxes reloaded, but they're not going to go just bare bones anymore. This is where we're going to start bringing in shreds of cucumber. That should help sweeten the deal, right? The cucumber's been frozen, as was the cantaloupe rind. Oh, as was the broccoli. I thought I had some stuff here that was not frozen. Oh, some of the things that we'll be feeding to the regular adult bin. There's some stuff over there that's not been frozen. So these are cantaloupe rind. Let's get some of that in here. Oops. All right. Hopefully we can sweeten the deal and get the worms to come over, exit their finished castings. And I mean, if the bait we're setting up for them doesn't do it, then I would just have to imagine that the gradual drying of the material itself would force them to kind of go looking for something better, you know, something a little bit more moist, damp, a little bit more comfortable. So in time, it seems inevitable that they probably will eventually gravitate to the middle, trying to get away from the encroaching dryness, and they'll end up stumbling on something that they kind of like anyway and hopefully stay. So now when we put these together, I'm going to need a fresh piece of tape. I also somehow need to squeeze in the rest of this stuff. It looks like it should fit. I don't mind it being a little bit of a snug fit, because I like the idea of the material coming up against the side of the container here, kind of making itself known to any passerby worms that there's, you know, yummy stuff in here. Yummy, thawing, juicy, sweet stuff surrounded by awesome bedding to nibble on too, you know. Because the bedding's not only just something we put out there for them to relax and hang out in, it's also a very important carbon-rich source of their diet. So I think we're ready to reattach these two halves together and rebury it. But I gotta go find some tape, so I'll be right back. Okay, here we go. Let's see how this is gonna work. I guess we're gonna go back to using both hands here. Because these things, I want all the openings to be, I guess, facing sideways. And those are all going to be buried. And what's on the bottom and what's on the top, this won't even be buried. This will just be sticking out just the way we found it when we got in here. And the bottom of it, I was even thinking of just like excavating completely so there's no material under there for them to cruise around and hang out. And if they go under there, they're just kind of under the box. And then next time we come in, there's no hiding. We just snatch them right out. 1, 2, 3. So we'll see how that goes. After, I don't know, it was pretty quick last time in the other system where I had put out a fairly delicious baiting setup for the worms. So here too, I would imagine the turnout might start occurring soon, I hope. It'd be really nice to see the worms starting to come together to exit their castings so that I could just reunite them with their family in the active worm bin and then call this material here as complete. Alright, so now I guess this will give us a little sneak peek at how many worms are still out in this stuff, you know. I mean, we've got some average size ones. I see a good number of little tiny ones too. The worms definitely look nice with these really dark, rich colors. They all look very healthy and happy as far as I could tell. Although happy in this stuff, I don't know. It definitely feels like it's drying out. The last few bits of it that still wouldn't crumble anymore all seem to be breaking apart nicely. Here's one that's not doing so quite nicely. I guess it's maybe a food scrap, actually. Whatever, but I mean, it's I think that's really kind of the last stand. All those little clumps that are still holding together because of a little bit of excess moisture, very few of them are still doing that. I think if I were to just comb through this material a few minutes, it would all gradually break up into like super nice fine castings only, no clumpiness anymore. And then there'd be no more little havens of moisture hidden in this stuff anymore. There's all these weird little chunks of like wood and stuff, you know. I guess it doesn't matter so much since I'm using this stuff out in my garden, and it doesn't matter if there's organic material mixed into my castings. I'm sure a lot of people consider their castings as finished too if there's still some stuff in there. You know, keep the microbes well fed and nourished. If the, you know, for example, if the material has to just sit in storage for a little while. So, how did I do this? Nice little gully right down the middle. Let the box just touch the bottom of the bin all the way down there so there's no castings for them to be roaming around. And, you know, for that matter, there's no holes over here either, so maybe the material should be focused in such a way that they're really getting maximum exposure to those slots in the baiting box. I don't know. I'm always kind of just experimenting with new things, you know. If I keep cookie cuttering everything, it'll all get very mundane pretty quickly. If you use each one of these opportunities as a way to try new things, experiment, see what works, see what doesn't work, I guess it also makes it a little bit more interesting too, that way. So yeah, we've got some worms to collect up out of this stuff, and as this stuff dries, I think it's going to become easier and easier. So, let's cover up again here. That plastic that we had covering things here, might be time to retire that, if you ask me too, you know, because as nice as it is that it was creating this little moisture haven here and causing the paper to be damp, you saw what it also did. It caused the worms to want to come out here and bask in the moisture. So there were worms on top of the paper, stuck to the bottom of it, on the plastic. At this point, let's let them focus on getting down into the bait box instead of coming up to the plastic to get moisture. And I think this will also help the material dry a bit, kind of causing that natural reaction of the worms to go seek out something better. All right, let's go get the adult bin and get them fed. Yeah, I'll tell you, for such a young system, only 19 days of age, it's got some good weight to it. So I don't know if that's just because there's excess moisture or just a lot of material. I think it's because there's a lot of material, because it's also so high up as far as the, you know, amount of material in here. I think it's because when we tried to collect the worms up out of that wedge setup that the previous system was in, it wasn't just bringing worms over, it was bringing over a good bit of finished material as well. And man, oh man, did this piece of, it's like paper bag type material. I think it might have been, I don't even know where it came from. I don't think it was an actual paper bag though. I think I've got some of this material just laying around. But it seems to me like this stuff sitting there right beneath that bubble wrap, right where all that moisture recirculates all the time. Seems like the worms must be coming up to nibble on this thing at night. Maybe during the daytime when there's so much brightness happening, shining through that bubble wrap, they just maybe are too timid to come out to the surface. But I got a feeling all that deterioration of the paper must have occurred out in the night time when it gets dark down here. So, what do we got here? Like I said, don't be impressed by the material or the appearance of the material. So I got a feeling a lot of this just came over with the old system that they were occupying. You know, a lot of very close to being finished castings material. So that definitely bulked up this system in size by a considerable amount. Yeah, I'm not, It's weird. It's not really ringing a bell to me exactly what the whole system's story is in terms of how we got here. I guess that's why I sometimes have little side projects, little tests, little experiments, you know, whatever, different things going on in some of my systems to sort of help them stand out from the rest, you know, so that they're not so all flowing together in my mind as just another bin, but some of them do different things. Here, this one's a little different because it is my original population of worms that I'm now trying to revive from a fairly small population from about a year ago. And over the past, you know, year or so, this population has grown nicely. It's not going to be very easy to see them amidst the material that makes up a new bin like this. Because as you can see, you know, all this bedding material, each of these pieces of bedding material almost looks like a worm in a way, especially when you get a red one like this, right? So the worms are going to blend in very well in this material. You know, if you kind of slow down and you don't move everything around constantly, then they'll start moving against the static background. Then you really get to spot them. Otherwise, they're virtually invisible and camouflaged into the material that they're occupying. It was pretty interesting, though, when I first opened up the system, took off the covers. Like, even before I took off the covers, I could hear this sort of squishing, you know, squishing sound down within the system. You know, a lot of worms just moving around throughout this stuff. Almost made the stuff sound damp and maybe overly moist, but it doesn't feel that way to me. It feels like it's almost just perfect. Lots and lots of nice castings everywhere. And my guess is that most of those castings that we're seeing right out here on the surface are the ones that came over with the worms from their previous environment when we scooped them out. Nice, you know, Harmon blending that stuff in, bringing some of this kind of clumped together bedding material that the system was made with from down below, bring it up. Get some of these castings intermingled between the pieces of cardboard. It just makes the whole environment much easier for the worms to move around within. And it also seems to me like it gives each piece a greater chance at being approached by a worm as opposed to just being surrounded by just a big clump of the same type of material. So I don't know, I went looking around on the outer edges for some reason, but we didn't go to the middle. And the middle is probably where we added the last feeding. I think it is, yeah. It's coming back to me because I did review the video. Duh. We put a whole frozen pear in here. We put an avocado, which might not even be breached yet. It could still be an unbroken shell. And there was, what else? Coffee, maybe? I thought there was a third thing, maybe a banana peel. So there's the avocado. And it does look like there was actually at least one or more openings here because they're mobbing it, right? You could see them all crowding around the door to get in. And my approach to this stuff is typically kind of from that experimenting curiosity point of view, is that I try not to disturb this stuff, you know? I'd almost rather just prefer to see it gradually make progress without me helping it break down into bits. And to me that just seems a little bit more interesting. I know I can definitely help that along if I, you know, break it all apart, and then maybe even within a couple of weeks, once the seed inside softens up to the point where it can be broken up, then I maybe break that apart as well. This is where all the worms are hanging out. No surprise. But, I don't know. We got time, right? What's the hurry? Sometimes with the seed, it is nice to try to just, you know, keep at it, keep trying to break it. Every time you bump into it, it might still be too hard to break, but at some point when it breaks, it feels good that you're able to increase its surface area, allow that many more worms to surround it and nibble on it. Yeah, this stuff is really nice. The banana peel, I guess we just haven't stumbled on it yet, or the pear. I'm not sure, you know, I even made a comment in the last video, I believe, about the pear, not knowing whether it would be a fast food or a slow food. If it was going to be like a typical apple, the way apples get broken down in my systems, they take forever for some reason. Oops. But maybe pears are different. Maybe pears go 1, 2, 3, because I would think that if there was a full pear placed in here 9 days ago, a good sized pear, that we'd be able to at least sense where it was positioned. I mean, the avocado was clearly right here, right? I don't know. Did we thoroughly look everywhere? Back and forth? Oh, I think we found a clue. Stem of a banana. Although it's so small, that looks like it might be something that would track back to a previous feeding, because it's really broken down heavily. I don't think that's what we would see after only that much time. I don't know. Maybe this bin is just going to end up giving us a whole bunch of surprises, because if I can't find a banana peel that I put into a system 8 days ago, that speaks volumes about the system's capability. Because I didn't think we had quite that many worms in here. I didn't think it was that impressive of a population. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think in the spreadsheet it amounted to maybe 1,500 worms or something like that. Not an impressive sized population, but if they're able to wipe out an entire pear and even make a banana peel vanish, so much so that I'm finding nothing of it, then I've really underestimated the capability of this system. And there we go. It's always when I'm about to like sort of make a poignant statement like that about how this might be some sort of a wonder bin that's got a capability beyond any other. That's when we find the pear. Looks pretty good, like they're sucking the juices out of it and eating the inside or something, because it's much smaller than it was. And if this was an apple, I think it would just be like untouched. It would be unchanged almost. But it still makes me wonder what the heck happened to the banana peel. But, you know, we don't have to go crazy tracking it down. It'll turn up someday, right? So why don't we just get the feeding that we bought down here for them in here. And I'll have to make a mental note that this system does seem to have a pretty good capability of burning through foods. Avocado might take a while. Maybe they only just breached through the skin. Maybe it was just a recent change that they finally made it in there. Who knows? Maybe it'll start breaking down much more quickly. The pear, I guess we'll put that smack in the middle right next to the avocado. I think that'll help us find it next time. And the banana stem too. As far as leftovers go, I'm sure there's more, because that wasn't the only feeding. There were feedings in here previously too, but we just didn't see any leftovers. That's okay. I guess we'll be back in here maybe another 7 or 8 days. I will be very curious to see if my baiting improvements are getting the better results that we're hoping for here. You know, it'd be nice to be able to call that system done and just empty the castings, wash the system, or, you know, wash the emptied bin and get it back in service, doing some more stuff rather than just trying to bait out a handful of little wormies. Alright. Looking good, looking good. Now, you know, this system's got a nice number of castings floating around in here. Oh man, what am I? I am, oops, well, I just helped the pear a bunch. I'm a real airhead. I'm sorry. I just got back from the weekend away, and maybe my head is still in the clouds. But it's a good thing I looked over, because if I hadn't, they wouldn't be getting all this good food. Alright, broccoli stem. Awesome. Another broccoli stem. How do you like that? Even a piece of yummy, starchy bread for them. As well as some cucumber peels. Another piece of cantaloupe rind. We'll throw in some coffee. And, you know, since we've got a nice new coffee filter here with which we can indicate where we last fed, we'll set that aside and use it for that purpose. But we could bring in the old coffee filter that was the feeding zone indicator. Throw that in here as supplemental bedding. That's a good idea. And, you know, as far as that top covering paper bag material, this stuff here, certainly not top covering material anymore. But it'll serve perfectly as bedding down within our feeding area. Or at least that's what I think. Huh, this ain't even as dried out as I thought it was. How do you like that? All right. We'll try to spread it out and see how that does. All right, everyone. I'm just going to try to bring a closure to this so that I don't stumble on any of my other mistakes or omissions. Because when I finally close the system up, it's done. Whether I miss something or not, it's done. And we'll just have to wait till next time if it was important. Maybe I'll make an exception. But here, I think we're done. The moisture that we're bringing in with some of these foods, I think, are sufficient. And the moisture within the system in general feels really good. Everything's damp and cool. So I think we're doing good here as far as moisture goes, you know. And it does feel good to have, you know, a space that's fairly large. To know that the worms can just spread out, fan out within the material, explore the whole space, and then hopefully get that sense that there's, you know, room enough in here for more, and that they start trying to create more little babies to fill the void. So for now, no top covering. We'll just skip it. That's fine. We'll just bring back the plastic covering, and here's an example of one of the little stowaways that I missed. Luckily, the moisture on these pieces of bubble wrap remains pretty good, and there's little damp pieces of casting stuck in there too, so it's not too treacherous with the bubble wrap. It's with the plastic sheets where I worry a little bit about stranding some little wormies, so I just try to be careful. All right, everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. There's also the join button if you feel like maybe providing the channel with a little bit of financial support. That's also very much appreciated. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.